Were Gojo and Geto more than just friends? Let's talk about it. All right, so shout out to Kev for asking for my thoughts on this. And I'm sure if you've been a part of the JJK fandom for really any amount of time, you've probably crossed paths with this ship, this Gojo and Geto had romantic feelings for each other theory. And I call it a theory because it's not confirmed, but neither is it unconfirmed. You know, this could really go either way, in my opinion. And before anybody gets weird in the comments, just go outside and touch grass. Gojo's one of my favorite characters, and if he's gay, that changes nothing. So no one, like, people that, like, get really heated about this, like, again, need to go outside. But my thoughts on it are that it is definitely possible, but we don't have enough information to know for sure. Basically, you could read the tea leaves and point to either direction. There are some really compelling elements to point to that potentially being the case, and I'll go over a couple, but then I'll also point out a couple things that could point to that not being the case. And one of the things Kev mentions that I have seen as well is in the OST for season two, there's potentially some symbolic hidden meaning that you could attribute to this potential Gojo Geto relationship. But, you know, it's it's not concrete, right? So you can't really say anything for sure, but if it does end up being the case, this could be one of the things that alluded to it. All right, so before we dive into any individual like pieces of evidence that could point to either thing, we need to examine the issue at the heart of all of this, and that is Gojo's character. Like, and I mean that literally in terms of a writing sense, right? The through line for Gojo's entire narrative is this idea of loneliness and strength, right? He is alone at the top because he is the strongest, compares himself to that beautiful flower that everyone likes to look at and admire, but no one can understand. Only Geto understood him. He was the only person he felt like he could connect with in that way because they were the strongest, at least at one point, before he awakened and then reached that pinnacle alone. But Geto was his best friend for this reason, the only person he felt like he could really connect with, right? And that is why they were so close. So that's the issue at the heart of this. And then could that have developed into romantic things? Sure, it's possible, especially considering this was the only other human being he really could be himself with and have that type of intimate, and I don't mean intimate in a romantic way, but intimate connection with. So yes, that could obviously develop into a romantic way, but it obviously could not either. It just depends. But that's at the root here because really Geto is the only one that Gojo even had this potential with, if that makes sense. To put it another way, I'm sure you have best friends, right? I have best friends and I love them, but I'm not necessarily in love with them. But I also have a best friend that I am in love with, my girlfriend, right? So at the root of it is just this intimate connection you have with someone you love, but it doesn't mean you're in love with them. It doesn't have to be romantic, but it can be. So this intimate connection between the two leads a lot to believe that romantic feelings were a possibility, right? And one of the things people like to point to is this final moment between Gojo and Geto where Gojo says something, we don't get to hear it, and Geto blushes and laughs and says, well, at least curse me a little bit in the end. So some people speculate that Gojo maybe said, I love you. But even if he did, again, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a romantic I love you. And fun fact, Gojo's English voice actor did reveal that what Gojo says in that moment was 3 words because it was revealed in the script they got for the movie, but they decided to also not say it to stay true to the original. He says, all will be revealed in my memoirs, but 3 words could be I love you, could be I'll miss you, could be we'll meet again. So again, regardless of what it was, even if it was I love you, doesn't necessarily mean romantic, but easily could be, right? Also, you could consider that the fact Kenjaku went to the lengths he did to trap Gojo and by manipulating his emotions by wearing this body, right? Now, again, that could just simply be explained by the love he had for his friend, but it could go deeper. And then as far as pointing away from the romantic feelings, we do know that Gojo's wallpaper when he was a teenager was a supermodel, but that's not completely conclusive. And then also there was a TV interview Gege did a while back where he said that there wasn't really room for romance in his story except for Miwa, alluding to the Miwa Mekamaru relationship that we get just a little bit of, right? So you could say, well, okay, that means the Gojo and Geto thing wasn't romance, which maybe, but it could also be that there was never room to really explore that because Geto passes away. And really, it's just JJK 0 where that would have been possible, where they were estranged the entire time, right? So again, you could look at it either way. Ended up talking about this longer than I thought I would. But at the end of the day, we don't know, right? So interpret the tea leaves how you want to. If when Gege points us a definitive direction, then we can go from there. But until then, nobody's harming anybody by making their own theories and how they interpret this. So more power to you. Now, since this is an anime-friendly video, I'm going to sneak in a couple more anime-friendly questions. And the first one we have here from Dip wants to know if I think Maharaga has emotions or if he's basically like a mindless drone. And he cites how Maharaga is seemingly having a lot of fun fighting Sukuna. So there's two things I'll say here. We can't take too much from the anime because, Mappa drew that fight out and did it amazingly, right? But in the manga, the fight wasn't that long, and so there wasn't as much emotion evoked from Maharaga. But that being said, I do think Shikigami have emotions. Like, obviously they are kind of these things to be controlled, especially once you subjugate them, but I don't think that makes them mindless. And I think the best example we have for this are Megami's divine dogs, right? Like, they very much seem like real dogs that have emotions that, Megami loves and the dog loves him back. So, I don't know if it's fair to equate it exactly to like a normal dog, but I think they have emotion. Finally, we have this insane donation from Count. Thank you so much, man. Like, the support is crazy. I really appreciate you. And I almost feel bad here because I don't have like an in-depth answer to this question here, but why did Iso cry? I think it's pretty much what we're presented with, pretty straightforward, that he is crying for the loss of his brother because all that they had, these three Curse Wound Death paintings, Choso, Eso, and Ketchizu, I hope I'm saying that right, all they've had their entire lives are each other, and they made the promise to look out for one another always, right? And he has just failed his brothers by letting one of them pass away. Because if you'll remember, they were just locked in these test tubes for 100+ years, just trapped in a dark room, only having each other. And they had like an awareness at this state. They didn't just become conscious the moment they incarnated. They had something here. And again, all they had was each other. So that's why their bond is so strong and why all of them care about their brothers so much. So yeah, I think he was just crying because like he had lost the most important thing in his life. And finally, we've got a few questions here from Dragon. And Dragon, thank you so much for the generous support, man. And this first question is all about Maharaga and like the 10 Shadows rituals. So y'all feel free to pause and read the whole thing if you'd like. But yeah, Shikigami's strength doesn't fluctuate based on how many people are involved in the ritual. It's just that if you have any help, regardless, whether there's somebody you intentionally included in the ritual or an outsider that just came by to help, it won't work. You have to do it by yourself. So yes, people that you don't specifically include in the ritual can still help you, just like we saw with Sukuna showing up in Shibuya, right? But it will negate the ritual. However, as far as like support buffs, like if you had a bunch of sorcerers that had abilities that increase the strength of other people and had them like cast that on you before you summoned the ritual, would that work? And we don't know for sure, but I would imagine like as long as all of that took place beforehand, I would think it would work probably. And then your second question down here on, does Yuji gain power or unlock more innate power? And this is interesting, and this, we're keeping this anime friendly, but there's slightly more nuance with the current state of the manga, perhaps, but I would say it's a mixture of both. Like, we know that Yuji couldn't really explore the world of cursed energy until he had Sukuna's finger, right? So in that sense, he absolutely gained power, but since then, I would say it's been more him unlocking innate power as opposed to gaining more strength each time he eats a finger, because that doesn't seem to be the case. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's a mix, but I think it's mostly Yuji just gaining his own strength, unlocking more of his innate talent and power as he goes on. And for Dragon's final question, he wants to know, what if somebody had the 6 eyes but not the same genius as Gojo? And this is really interesting because I do think Gojo is the strongest 6 eyes limitless user ever, and I think that's attributed to his talent, his genius, what have you. So I do think there are differentials in that regard, but an interesting thing to think about is that if you have the 6 eyes, you probably also have like a certain level of intellect that's just going to come paired with that, just based on the information those eyes are giving you, right? Now, certainly some people are going to be better at processing it, better at understanding and utilizing it than others. Again, hence Gojo being the best to ever do it. But, I do think it's possible that like a dumber person could have the six eyes and wouldn't be able to use it as well. And then as far as like what the six eyes gives you, I would lean that it's more just raw data, and then it's up to the user to like interpret that and spit out like, okay, this data means they have this curse technique, as opposed to getting like a magical book that just tells them everything they need to know. So that would be my understanding of it. And man, your English was great, so no worries at all. That's going to do it for this one, y'all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.